Alright, it's time for Wildfire Insider. This is the kind of daily show where we just try to get an idea of what's going on in California in the worlds of wildfire and weather. If you're new to this channel, my name is Holt Hanley. I'm a broadcast meteorologist on the Central Coast. I'm also a wildfire researcher for San Jose State, and then I also produce these wildfire forecast videos on YouTube. Now usually I do a 10-minute wildfire video on the top story of the day and then a 2-minute concise video, and I typically spend about an hour researching what's going on in California. Wildfire Insider is basically the curtain being pulled back on that research process where we can all try to figure out what's going on with wildfire in California together. So feel free to post any questions or comments that you have in the live chat, and I'll hopefully include those in this video, because more brains are better than one. So this is a good place to start. Just active fires of interest. We've got Mosquito fire, Fairview fire, Mountain fire. I think those will most likely be the three main stories that we're looking into today, although we don't exactly know where we're going to end up in this video. So I think a good place to start, I actually have the maps from the Mosquito fire. I think that's going to be our top story for the day, so I'm going to start there. Good place to start is actually just looking at the numbers on it. Looks like it's at 46,587 acres, 10% contained. I want to see how much that went up. I posted some tweets yesterday, so this is about 17 hours ago. I think it was around maybe 5 o'clock, and we're at 41,443 acres, so we've jumped up by about 5,000. I think that growth, though, was yesterday, and then it just took them doing another flight to get that new data. I don't believe that we grew 5,000 acres overnight. The reason I say that is because where we picked up yesterday, we had all that moisture moving in overnight. We had great relative humidity recoveries, and then that really diminished fire activity. I saw one nighttime video of the Mosquito fire, and as all that moisture moved in, it just completely died down. And just looking at this, if you were watching this at the very beginning of this time lapse, I'll just go back to it, you would not really even think there is a wildfire going on. It just looks like all that smoke settled down to the surface, and that's what happens when those winds calm down overnight. All of the smoke just settles down, but then as the smoke starts to clear, that allows more sunlight in, leads to some warmer temperatures, some drier conditions, and then it does look like we're starting to see the Mosquito fire become a little bit more active as of right now. So I'd be interested to see what it looks like from the satellite imagery. It's going to be that black dot right there. It's hard to see because we still have so much cloud cover over this area. It's all that leftover moisture from what was Hurricane K. It's something we've been talking about for maybe 3 or 4 days now. Yeah, so we can't really even see what's going on underneath those clouds. You know, just right off the bat, I'd be interested to see if we're getting any rainfall. So let's check out the radar. Because when we were talking about the weather yesterday, we did have more thunderstorms in the forecast for this afternoon than we actually had yesterday. But if we look at it right now, yeah, it doesn't really look like there's some activity to the west right here. And then we're starting to see some pop up in the Sierra, but typically your thunderstorm activity is going to be largest around maybe 2 to 5 o'clock. So I think this will be something that we continue to watch throughout the day today to see if we end up getting some thunderstorms popping up. Again, right here is Forest Hill, so we actually have 2 little cells pretty close to this, and that one might actually be over the fire right there. So let's just go back. We can actually see where some of that growth was yesterday. So zooming out right here. Again, I don't think the recent mapping is as good as it normally would be because we had a lot of cloud cover last night. So that can sometimes interfere with them being able to pick up the heat signatures of where that fire is. But if we turned it on and off, you can still get the general idea of where we had the most growth, or more importantly, where we didn't have growth. Key spot that I was looking at a couple days ago is this section of the fire right here. reason that was the key place I was looking at, we can go over to CalTopo, turn on structures. We have, wait for it, a lot of structures right in that little pocket right there. But just looking at this map, all those red dots represent where there's more active fire behavior that's picking up the hot spots right there. Again, that it might be understating it because of all the cloud cover we have right now, but not seeing really any recent hot spots around that pocket that we were concerned about. And when we go to this map too, look at that same pocket, not seeing that line jump out at all when I turn off the data that we have to work with this morning. So it doesn't look like we've had any recent growth there. If we zoom into Forest Hill, not seeing any recent growth there either. We have a lot of completed dozer lines right there, and I'd actually be interested to see if we've gained some containment there. So we'll come back to that map in 1 second. Just want to see if our containment number's gone up. Still at about 10% containment. And if we want to see where that containment is, this is something that we did yesterday. If you go to In-sid-er, I have the link for this website in the description, and then you can go to maps, and that one's 5 hours ago. That's 1 day ago. Let's try the one 5 hours ago. It looks like we have some of that containment shown on here. All right, so your containment is going to be where you see the black line around this fire. So that's where the great news comes in, that little pocket that we were talking about that has all those structures. That's where we see some of that black line, and expecting more of that to show up, not only right there, but I would say around Forest Hill as well, because where you see those little black X lines, those are completed dozer lines all around the Forest Hill community. So looking fairly good there as well. Now, I did have a number of people ask me about Georgetown yesterday. So just analyzing this map and this map together, I would say we're looking pretty good for Georgetown because we're not seeing any of those red stars on that side of the fire, which means we're not seeing all that much activity. And then that's also the side of the fire where we're looking the best in terms of containment. And then I'm actually surprised it's only listed at 10%. If you were to just kind of estimate how much of that fire perimeter is black, I don't know. Let me know what you think in the live chat, but I would guess that'd be more than 10%. But yeah, we'll see if that number jumps up at any point later today. Now it does look, not surprisingly, that we do still have some evacuation orders and warnings. That's something else you can do on the In-sid-er website, link in the description, where it says evacuations. That normally is a link right there. So I maybe forgot to refresh this page. Yeah, so those two links right there, that'll take you to a map that looks something like that, and you can stay updated on all those recent mandatory evacuations shown in that red color, or those evacuation warnings shown in that green color right there. So let's go back to this map because this shows where the majority of our growth has been recently. And let's just turn it on and off again to see. Yeah, most of the growth was on that northeastern section of the fire. If we want to actually just zoom in there, keep an eye on where the fire was yesterday and where the fire is now. I believe some of that up there is actually firing operations that have gone on, basically clear out some of the fuels, but some of that is likely the fire just moving on its own right there. And it's not a big surprise that we're still seeing some growth in that area, because whenever we've been looking at the afternoon winds, the winds have been predominantly coming from the southwest in the afternoons, and then that's been pushing the fire towards the northeast. Now today looks like it's kind of all over the place in terms of wind direction. So overall, I would guess that we're still going to get that same southwesterly flow that'll try to push this fire towards the northeast, take some of that activity and continue to move it either towards the east or the northeast. But I think the reason our winds are a little bit all over the place right here is because that's most likely the models taking into account some of that thunderstorm activity. So let's go thunderstorms. Oh, yeah, that was exactly what was happening. So let's go click back here a second. Let's go to 11 a.m. That's actually pretty close to what it looks like right now. On the radar, we saw a couple little pockets around Forest Hill right here where we might be getting some light rainfall. But as we go into this afternoon, click to 2 p.m., really seeing that thunderstorm activity pick up in the Sierra. And then if we fast forward to 5 p.m., it looks like there's going to be a thunderstorm directly over the fire. Now, big disclaimer I'll put on this one is where thunderstorms actually pop up is, I'd say, one of the things that the models have the hardest time kind of figuring out. So I'd be surprised if our thunderstorm activity actually ends up looking exactly like this later today, but it does give you a general idea of overall activity expected in an area, and that's more activity than we were seeing yesterday. Then when it comes to thunderstorms, it can either be a good or a bad thing. I've talked about this throughout this week, but it could be good if we get some nice cloud cover or it drops some light rainfall. There is some possibility for that today. But then the bad news, as Joe Dirt just said in the live chat, bad news with lightning or bad news with thunderstorms is you can get lightning, which starts some new fires. And then you can also get the gusty winds that are associated with thunderstorms, and that can lead to some erratic fire behavior or faster fire spread. So I think this is something that we're just going to have to wait and see to find out exactly how the thunderstorms interact with this fire. Could go either way. I would say so far this season, if I had to kind of add up all the different wildfires that we've looked at, seems to me that thunderstorms overall have been a good thing for wildfires this season. I believe it was the McKinney fire where we had some thunderstorms move in, dropped enough rain that a bunch of moisture returned to the fuels, and then it completely calmed the fire down. So it looks like Robert in the live chat, both Lucy and Robert in here, my great moderators, and he said, had some rain this morning, now clear with a slight breeze. So I'm glad you said something about clear, because that was one thing that I was hearing in a couple of reports that I briefly looked at this morning. The last couple days we've had very calm winds, so that smoke has just settled over the fire, and that's been decreasing our activity just because not as much sunlight gets through there. It stays cooler, then it stays a little bit more moist. But today, I believe they're actually expecting to get a little bit better clearing, and the reason for that is I believe our winds are going to be a little bit stronger than the last couple days. Yeah, around 26 mile per hour gusts, and then if those thunderstorms come through, that's where you can get some really gusty conditions. So I'm interested to see what they're saying about the weather when it comes to InSiWeb, because overall what we figured out, thunderstorm activity better or larger or more active today than yesterday. Temperature-wise, a little bit cooler. That's likely due to that increased cloud cover. Humidity, that's where we could have a large amount of humidity if some of those thunderstorms do end up coming through. 5 p.m. a few days ago, we were as low as 13% relative humidity. If we get some of that thunderstorm activity, it could be as high as 61%. So very interested to see what the meteorologists actually on this fire saying. So weather concerns, overnight low temperature Sunday were in the 60s and relative humidity recovery to around 60%. That was what I was talking about earlier, where we had so much moisture move in overnight that through the early morning hours, we had very little activity on this fire, and then the winds decreased so much that all that smoke just settled down over the fire overnight. That leads to some poor air quality, but then it does help calm the fire down. And then it's interesting that as you see some of that smoke clear out, you start to see some of that fire activity pick up, and that's definitely going to be the main thing I'm watching throughout this afternoon. I think most likely how I'm going to do it today is we're going to look at everything in California that's going on in this video, try to get a general idea of the details when it comes to wildfire and weather in California, and then I'm probably going to wait a few hours to see how much clearing we get, to see what ends up happening with those thunderstorms. And then I'll do the 10-minute in-depth video and then the 2-minute concise video on what seems to be the top story for the day, which is most likely going to be the Mosquito fire. So let's go. See, somebody just said 78 in Santa Rosa right now. That actually reminds me, I'd like to see what temperature we are in Forest Hill right now. So it looks like, let's go to the details of the weather. And interesting that relative humidity seems to be almost increasing right now. So yeah, relative humidity is still around 50% at 12:06 p.m. So that's some great news on this fire. That tells you that a lot of this moisture has moved in. The reason that's important is more moisture that's in the air, more moisture finds its way into those finer fuels, and it just basically reduces your fire spread. Then temperature-wise, we're hovering around 75 degrees and actually starting to go down in the last 30 minutes here. So doesn't look like we're going to be all that hot or dry throughout the day today. And I think the big question mark again is going to be how the fire interacts with those thunderstorms. So back here, last night winds were light in Down Canyon. Trace amount of precipitation was observed in Forest Hill. So whenever we get some precipitation on a fire, it's tempting to get excited about it and think that it just put the fire out, but most of the time that's not exactly the case, although it always does help to get whatever moisture we can. Although, as we've seen the last couple nights, it's actually reduced their ability to do firing operations because so much moisture has moved in that they can't even put fire on the ground to try to clear out some of those fuels. Now this one, Monday, an incoming weak weather system will bring slightly stronger southwest winds, drier air aloft. This will push lingering moisture well to our east. This drier, cleaner air should allow the fire to ventilate more Monday afternoon. So what they're talking about there is kind of what we're seeing on this time lapse. And let's actually restart this time lapse because that might be an hour old at this point. So we had all that smoke early in the morning, but then we start to see some of that smoke clear out. And as the smoke clears out, the fire activity starts to pick up. And then as that continues to happen, the fire activity, what they're saying, is just going to continue to pick up even more. So we read that sentence. Southwest winds will remain fairly light, 5 to 10. Afternoon temperatures should reach the lower 80s and humidity in the 25 to 30% range. So that's interesting what they're saying right there. And I think the big question mark is going to be what ends up happening with those thunderstorms. But again, just looking at the map of this fire, most of that activity recently has been on the eastern side. What they're saying, southwest winds again. Looking at the wind plot right now, that looks to be the direction the winds are going. So that's going to try to take these hot spots and continue to push them towards the northeast. Now, if we want to look at some fire history in here, so takes these red dots that shows where the active fire is, going to try to push that into where we have unburnt fuels and actually fuels that haven't burnt for a long time. So we might get a little help in this section. It looks like there's the 2013 American fire. It's almost like a puzzle piece to where the Mosquito fire is right now and that fire. That's getting right into that range though, where some of those fuels could have grown back in that period. So it's going to be very interesting to watch this section to see how good of a burn scar this is in there and if the fire just kind of stops in its tracks. Now where we don't have a burn scar and where I'd predict the most growth over the next 24 hours to be would be this section right around here. I know we did get some very large air tankers on it yesterday. I would imagine we get some more. I'd imagine they just direct a large amount of resources to this side today because it definitely looks to be the part of the fire that is the most active. And where you don't see a burn scar, that means there's a lot of fuels in there that haven't burned recently. And then because of the drought, they're going to be exceptionally dry as well. So I think that pretty much sums up the Mosquito fire at this point. One thing we haven't looked at, air quality, looking at it for today. does show that very unhealthy air quality, especially around Lake Tahoe, just everywhere around that mosquito fire. If the winds pick up this afternoon, it actually could clear out some of that smoke. But then the bad side of things, it also could clear out the smoke, which is going to allow the temperatures to get a little bit warmer and those winds to pick up. So now let's go back to our CAL FIRE site and just take a look at some of the other fires going on, just to see if these would be things worth really looking into today. It looks like the Fairview fire is at 28,307 acres, 53% containment. First thing I'm interested about is if we have any hotspots on that one. The last few times we've looked at it, we didn't really have any hotspots whatsoever. So yeah, we've been looking good on the Fairview fire. Let's see where it pops up. Right about there. Yeah, we had a lot of help on this one when Hurricane K moved through. It's kind of hard to call it help because, again, Hurricane K brought some flooding to Southern California, some gusty winds. But in terms of wildfire behavior, I haven't seen any hotspots on the Fairview fire since then. Not seeing any ghost detection, so we're looking pretty good down there, and I would imagine that 53% containment just continues to grow. Now, the other fire that we see on that list is the mountain fire, and this was one that we were looking good for a while, and then all of a sudden it just flared up again. I believe it was yesterday it really flared up again. That one's at 13,254 acres, so I believe that's about 1,000 more acres than when I covered this yesterday. 60% contained. Now let's check out to see if there's any active hotspots on that one, and to see if that flare up was just kind of a fluke. So yesterday, where you see all those yellow dots, that's where it was extremely active yesterday, but only seeing one little red dot now, which tells me that the fire seems to have calmed down a lot in the last 24 hours. So that's some good news. Let's check out ghost detections. Not seeing any heat. Again, when I say not seeing any heat, that doesn't necessarily mean the fire, it definitely doesn't mean the fire is completely out. If we saw activity yesterday, there's for sure places that are still smoldering. But when it comes to, yeah, you also can't say that it's out because we have a lot of cloud cover right now, and there's always just the chance that the clouds are so thick that the satellite imagery isn't able to pick up some heat. So those, you always have to kind of add a disclaimer because we might just have a lack of data. Now, something I want to try here. Let's see if we can check out some thunderstorms on here. Maybe infrared. I think our best site for thunderstorms. Oh, that one actually looks pretty good. So it looks like we have some thunderstorms popping up in Northern California. I'd imagine we start to see more pop up in this section of the Sierra as we get into this afternoon. Alright, this one's going a little slow. I think it just needed to load. Now it should probably play all the way through. Yeah, not really seeing anything. There's some of that activity right over the Mosquito fire. So let's zoom back over to our radar. Let's refresh it again. Because there is the potential that we're actually getting some late rainfall over the Mosquito fire. There's Forest Hill. So that's where the northwestern section of our fire is. It's a shame we don't have the fire perimeter on here, but you can imagine it's right about there. So we definitely have some of this thunderstorm activity in the general vicinity. And then, as I mentioned, we're just going to have to wait and see how things interact there. Now, something else we can do is go to our weather source. I'm just interested to see kind of the long range forecast that we can expect when it comes to weather in California, and just overall what it's going to be like this week. Is it going to be a very hot, dry week, or is it going to be kind of a nice week for wildfire danger? Because last week was about as bad as it possibly could be. We had that heat wave going on in California where it was triple digits, record-breaking temperatures, and that led to a lot of this wildfire activity that we saw pop up, like the Mosquito fire and the Fairview fire. Interesting that what ended up almost like saving us was Hurricane K. So I said that in one of my tweets the other day that never thought I'd say this, but moisture from a hurricane helped to diminish wildfire activity throughout the day today. So it's been quite a week when it comes to weather and wildfire in California. Let's zoom into Monday afternoon. So this is where there's some good news. All of Southern California expected to be below average temperatures, and then also stretching into the Sierra as well. So the Mosquito fire would be right about there. That blue color, this is temperature anomaly. So what that basically means is if your average temperature over the Mosquito fire today is 80 or 90 degrees, I'm just kind of making up a number there. This blue color looks to be about 10 degrees below average, so our forecast high would only be 80 degrees. So whenever you see blue on this map, it means good news for wildfire danger. Central Valley, warmer than average, but almost everywhere else in California, blue, which is much different than we were last week, where this entire map was about 20 to 30 degrees above average. Looking at tomorrow afternoon, actually looks like there's more cooling throughout California. That's some great news there. Then looking at Wednesday afternoon, Sierra once again looking to be about 5 to 10 degrees below average. Then let's just click all the way to Thursday, cold again, and Friday, cold again. So looks like we have a below average week when it comes to temperatures. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to be dry out. But as a general rule of thumb, the warmer you are, normally the drier you're going to be. So the cooler you are, the more moisture we're most likely going to have. So that's the next 5 days. Then we can look at 6 to 10 days out. Below average conditions throughout all of Northern California and even stretching down almost to Southern California too. All right, so we're looking good for the next 10 days. What about 8 to 14 days out? That's where we maybe see some of that heat move back in, showing Bay Area down through Southern California, getting back to that slightly above average conditions. So, yeah, it looks like we're good for the next 10 days. Again, that doesn't mean that we're not going to see any wildfire activity because the fuels are exceptionally dry. So at any point in time over the next month or two until we start getting some really good rains, wildfires are a possibility, but it at least looks like temperature and humidity will most likely be cooperating. Now, we'll also point out Northern California, 6 to 10 days out, showing that green color. That's an above average chance at precipitation. Sierra showing below average chance. 8 to 14 days out, all of Northern California and the Sierra showing a below average chance of precipitation. Now, I wouldn't really say that's too concerning. This time of the year, you wouldn't really expect any precipitation anyway, unless you get maybe some thunderstorms from monsoons. So, yeah, not too worried about that. But I'd say overall, good to see that over the next 5 days, we're going to have below average temperatures. And then 6 to 10 days out, we're also going to have some below average temperatures. So that pretty much sums up the overall weather and wildfire for California. One final thing I could do, I would still say the Mosquito fires are top story for the day. So I'll just do a brief overview for anybody who just joined the live stream. And then what I'm going to do is wait about 3 or 4 hours to see how the thunderstorms interact with the Mosquito fire. And then I'll do a 10-minute video and then a 2-minute video really explaining what's going on in that at the peak of our wildfire activity later this afternoon. But for the Mosquito fire, we're at about 46,587 acres. If we want to see where that recent growth has been, we can zoom out here and turn on and off the most recent data that we had today. You notice not that much growth, especially compared to how much we've grown in previous days. And where we have that growth, it looks to be on the eastern and northeastern section of the fire. Now when it comes to the area around Forest Hill, this whole eastern flank of the fire, that's where a lot of good news is coming in. when we look at the hotspot activity, all the red dots, which represent where there's been more activity recently, are on that eastern side. The area around Forest Hill and this eastern pocket right here look to be extremely calm. Now, that doesn't mean the fire is out in those areas, because there are so many clouds over the Mosquito fire right now that there's also just the chance that the satellites aren't able to pick up the heat through all of those clouds. But regardless, we're looking a lot better than we did just a few days ago. Now, the other good news is that where the fire is more active, where you see those red dots, is the section of the fire that's furthest or farthest away from the largest amount of structures. So we were really worried when it was getting close to Forest Hill right here. You can see how close it got to all of those structures, and then also this pocket right there. But that's where the fire seems to be really calming down right now. And when it comes to that one pocket, that's also where we're starting to see some containment on this fire. So right now, they're saying 10% contained. But when we look at this map, we're getting some containment in the exact places that we'd want it. Containment shown with the black line right there around that eastern or western pocket, around the southern side as well. We're starting to see a little bit more on the north right here. And then as we continue to move forward, expecting to see more around Forest Hill, where you notice all those black X's. That's completed dozer line right there. So pretty good news when it comes to fire activity. If I had to forecast what direction the fire is going to spread today, not exactly a hard forecast. We have those southwesterly winds still, and then the only activity is, or I shouldn't say the only activity, but the majority of our activity is still on that eastern and northeastern side of the fire. So with those winds, it's going to try to push that fire more towards the northeast. The other reason I'd say that part of the fire where we'll see the most growth today, I would imagine, is this little area right here. Part of the reason I say that is because we don't have any fire history in there. So there's some fuels that haven't burned in quite some time. Now, when it comes to the weather forecast, or first, I should just point out once again, there are still evacuation orders and warnings. You can find that by clicking the link in the description for InSiWeb, clicking on those two maps right there, and then it'll take you to something that looks like that, and you can figure out where all the recent evacuation warnings and orders are. When it comes to our conditions right now over the fire, temperatures not all that warm. We're just in the mid 70s right now. The really good thing to see is our relative humidity values, 46% near Forest Hill right now, and we might even be getting a little rainfall activity there at some point today, and possibly even right now, as we see few of those pockets of light rain moving through kind of our forecast area. Now, that doesn't exactly mean the rain is going to put out a fire. We're not expecting large amounts of rain, but could certainly help to just bring a little bit moisture back into the fuels, even if we don't get any rain. So let's also just go to right here, because I think this summarizes the main thing that I'm going to be covering in my videos later this afternoon for the Mosquito fire. I'm going to wait a couple hours to see what ends up happening with this thunderstorm activity, because it looks like around 2 p.m. thunderstorms really starting to pick up in the Sierra, and then by 5 p.m. the model is showing a thunderstorm directly over the fire. Again, the models aren't great at forecasting thunderstorms, so we'll see if this ends up happening. But yeah, I'd say that's a good way to put it. We'll see if this ends up happening. If you want to see for yourself, I'll make another couple of videos on the Mosquito fire, especially later this afternoon. I'd say that is still our top story in California, because Fairview fire and Mountain fire both look to be diminishing in activity. So if you want to stay tuned for those updates or any other wildfires throughout the rest of this season, you can subscribe to this channel, and you can also follow Holt Hanley Wildfire Forecasting on Twitter, because sometimes I don't have enough time to make a video, so I'll just put out the recent information if there's any big changes, and that's a quicker way to sometimes get information. So I hope this video was helpful, and thank you for watching.